Welcome to the Sustainable Living Podcast. Tips, tools, and tactics for living a heart-centered life that honors Mother Earth and her inhabitants. The information shared on the Sustainable Living Podcast reflects the opinions of host Marian West, Janice Friant, and their guests. Please use your own discretion in research before applying any information to your individual situation. Now, here are your hosts.
This is Marianne West with the Sustainable Living Podcast, and I'm here with Blake Akers, who is involved in a very exciting, I think, certification process or consumer help process. Well, we're going to flesh out what exactly it is. Welcome, Blake.
Hey, great to be here today.
Thank you so much for coming on. First of all, say the name of the business, and then I have a whole bunch of questions about it.
Sure. So the business is Agri True, and it's based around a website called agritrue.com. And it's, like you said, it's a food certification and an online directory for Beyond Organic producers.
The reason I first contacted Blake is I heard him on another podcast from the ZEP folks, which I really like him, Stacy and Amy. I thought that Agri True had been around for a while, and so I was a little bit surprised that it was new. But also I had just finished an interview with somebody who was involved in the USDA Organic certification. So I thought this was really interesting. First of all, would you go into how are we going about your certification process? What does it look like?
Sure. And kind of the answer that you didn't really ask the question, but Agri True has been around for a while. And what this is really Agri True 2.0. The first time around, it kind of didn't go anywhere for a lot of different reasons. And so this is more or less a reboot that's been, I guess, accomplished in the last year or so. With Agri True, our goal is to make a certification that is accessible to startups, to people that are doing small scale farming, and at the same time is more rigorous in certain aspects than USDA. So we kind of felt that there was an opportunity there, and that market just wasn't served very well from a standpoint of having something accessible to the small farmer or the farmer that's starting out from scratch.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for clarifying that. I was going to ask you about that because I was like, I thought I had already signed up for that a while back. So basically, this is a reboot. So I want to lay out my understanding of it. So you have a website and farmers can sign up to be part of the certification process. And then consumers can find the farmers. Is that right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And really takes probably, I haven't sat down and timed it. I'll admit to that, but no more than 10 minutes on average, I would say, to get your farm listed on the site. And what that does is it not only gets you on the site to where people in your local area can find you, but it also gives you all this marketing material that we're trying to expand and grow on. So right now you've got a few different labeling, basically product labeling graphics that you can put on your product, and also certification. You could display at a farmer's market and things like that. And I'm working on growing that and kind of expanding the marketing material to help out our members. So it's really twofold.
Twofold in a sense that you are helping with marketing and that people get a platform to be found, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you've got the online marketing aspect, and also we're developing real world stuff like handouts that you can take with you to kind of promote your brand.
Cool. So you were saying that on one way it's more rigorous than USDA certification, and on another way it's not. So would you first go into how is it more rigorous?
It's more rigorous in the sense that you have to have a soil management program with the goal. We're not going to tell you exactly how to do it, but the reason why we want you to do that is to build the soil on your farm and fight things like erosion and that sort. So you have to have some sort of a management program that's designed to build the soil over time. Kind of a perfect example would be Joel Salatin. He did a video, and you could see like this pasture, and he had fence posts that were just a few inches out of the ground. And originally when he took over the farm, I think it was full 6-foot fence post. And over time they had built up so much topsoil just from good practices that happened, they ran into, I guess, a good problem of, well, now we got to rebuild a fence if we want to fence in this pasture. Yeah, you've got to have a soil management program. And on the animal side of things, with USDA Organic, it's unfortunate to say that sometimes you can meet the certification standard, but an example of chickens and different livestock, they don't necessarily have to be out in the sun eating grass and bugs and doing what chickens are supposed to do naturally. So part of our standard is that if you have livestock, they have to have access to fresh pasture, fresh forest area, and they can't just be confined all the time and still meet the standard.
Right. And maybe to explain it a little bit, said I think USDA requires that they have actually access to, but said access does not necessarily mean that, for example, that chickens actually go outside. Because a lot of them are raised in a big, huge house, and they might have a little door which leads to a little outdoor space, but they don't even know what sunshine looks like, right?
Exactly. And with our standard, we want the animals to not just have access to, but to get out and enjoy nature and basically live the life they're supposed to live, as opposed to being locked up all the time. And that, to me, that makes for healthier food for us, and it's just all around a better situation. And they actually can become an asset to a farm if you kind of take a principle from permaculture and close loops and make things work together. So getting back to that soil management, if you're properly moving animals around a property, over time, they tend to actually build up soil and increase the biological activity because of that fertility action. So it makes sense from an economic standpoint, as well as just being kind to animals and taking care of people aspect. So it's really a common sense thing. And you almost want to think, well, why do we need a standard to enforce this? But then you look around at the world we live in, and there's organic eggs on the shelf that cost you $2, $3 more than conventional eggs. And really, the only big difference there is maybe no antibiotics in the feed. They live in the same chicken houses, same environments. It's kind of one of those things you have to wonder, like, why isn't this common sense?
Yeah, that's so many things in the world where we have to wonder, why is not common sense applied here? I wanted to come back to soil. Maybe not everybody understands why that is such an important aspect of your certification. Would you explain why soil is important?
I think it gets back to a long-term sustainability problem. And I'm not talking commercial export, but I'm just talking export by raw tonnage. The thing we export out of the U.S. the most is topsoil, and it's not sent out on a cargo ship. It's not on a plane. It's just blown away with the wind and ends up somewhere in the Atlantic Ocean. And to me, it's like you look at natural soil building, a process that takes hundreds, if not thousands of years over time. And how long did it take to get to where we are with fertility levels, and how fast are we squandering that resource when we could be making it better every year and making our food quality better, making ourselves healthier and that sort of thing. So really, I don't know who said it, but we really our lives depend on a few inches of topsoil, and without it, we wouldn't exist. That's really a big, important resource for us, and right now we're squandering it. So our goal is to kind of reverse that trend, make for healthier, more mineral-rich food, and kind of make the whole situation more sustainable with agriculture.
Thank you for that. I think more and more research is going into how important soil is. Certain big thinkers always knew about it and have said it for a long time, but it seems commercial agriculture kind of disregarded that and said, oh no, we just have inputs, we use chemical fertilizer. But I think a lot of people realize that health and healthy soil are closely related. So on your application on the website, I really liked something you said. If you want to sell vegetarian fed eggs, don't apply. Do you want to explain why?
Well, yeah, sure. Okay, so let's look back at an evolutionary standpoint. Chickens today eat grain, which is not really natural. Traditionally, and there's wild birds in parts of the world that are basically the ancestors of a domesticated chicken. And what do? They live in a forest. They eat plants, they eat fungus, and they eat bugs. So to say that you have vegetarian or eggs that aren't produced with meat, to me, that's an indication and a red flag right there that tells me, well, obviously, if you've got a controlled environment and you can keep chickens from doing what's natural to them, being predators of insects, I don't want to eat that product. I want to have healthy chicken eggs that came from an animal that was out in the wild foraging, doing what it naturally does. So it was kind of a tongue-in-cheek sort of thing there to put that in the description on the site, but it really drives home an important point, and that is that eggs aren't going to be vegetarian. Chickens are going to do what chickens do. That's part of the environment, that's part of ecology, and that's just what a chicken does. So let chickens be chickens.
Yeah, I really loved that. It it totally caught my eye. And I do have chickens and I watch them and they love bugs. There's just no doubt about it. Big juicy crops. So consumers would go to your website and search for a provider, right? And then how do you become a provider and what can you all offer to the public to fall under the standards you're setting?
Okay, so to become a provider, you would just go to agritrue.com and then you're going to click on either the pricing plan or you can go to listings and then go down to submit listing. And the whole process really takes about 10 minutes. You pick a price tier. There's discounts if you want to sign up for a longer listing up to 3 years. Once your listing's live, you can be searched through zip code. People can search just going through the list on categories. We've got probably a dozen different categories, everything from, we're talking eggs to dairy, vegetable production, products produced on the farm, like things from handmade soap and that kind of thing. So, and that's really what you can offer to the public is a way to easily find somebody local to you. Reach out to them, and maybe they're at the farmer's market already, or maybe you can schedule a visit to the farm and kind of being that bridge to connect the producer to the consumer without necessarily having to leave the house to find somebody that has quality food in your area.
So now I have let's say 25 chickens and that's maybe all I produce eggs on the farm. So I could sign up for a fairly inexpensive plan and just say, okay, I sell whatever, 4 dozen eggs a week. And I could do that, right? And then people could just come to my house and get it.
Yeah, that's right. For less than $1 a month, the small scale home producer, if you're somebody that just does like maybe a farm stand on the side of the road, the edge of your property, you have access to Agri True. Whereas with USDA Organic, I've heard numbers anywhere from $700 to $5,000 and probably at least a year of paperwork to get on the standard. So for that person that's just got 25 laying hens, or they just have a small market garden and they're not really a big scale producer, they don't have access to USDA Organic, but this kind of gives them access to that.
Right. Yeah, we have local farmers markets, and there are times where people complain that they don't have enough farmers to come in, but you have to be certified. And it's not quite that expensive for a backyard farmer, but still you have to deal with that. Now you have a government entity coming in and inspecting, and if you, let's say, have 2 pomegranate trees which produce well and that's all you want to sell, even if it's not that expensive, it's not really worth it. So how would you be doing the enforcing, making sure that people do what you want them to do?
Right now, the primary mechanism would be the rating system on the website. And if we see a bunch of negative reviews, that's kind of a red flag, and we'll investigate. And we might have to say, you know what, you don't really meet the standard. Here's a refund. We're going to take your listing down and that sort of thing. But it's really on the honor system, and it's community policed at the moment. And we're thinking about adding a totally different structure to where you can voluntarily have someone come out and certify your farm, and that would be just a different tier of certification. And I think that's probably going to be something we pursue in the next few months. But for right now, we really want to focus on making it accessible and not really having the Agri True police out enforcing the standard, because at the end of the day, the consumer is going to be, if they're educated, they're going to be the best mechanism to police things like that, in my opinion.
Right. So you basically encourage the producers to be open to consumers to come and visit.
Yeah, exactly. And on the other side of that, we don't want to kind of encourage the behavior to where it's like, what's going on your farm, and asking a bunch of questions and things like that. And really, at the end of the day, I think you do a lot of stuff right, and some stuff that's maybe not perfect, but if you're moving in the right direction, I would rather see forward progress. I would rather see people building soil, doing the right thing where you can, and understanding that there's no perfect model of farming and food production. So you can't really sacrifice the perfect for the good. And one of the things that's kind of a controversy with Agri True is that for the time being, we allow food producers that deal with livestock to use GMO feed. And the reason behind that is in some markets right now, you can't even get GMO free feed. And if you can, it's pricing people out of production. So you're not doing things perfectly when you do that stuff. But if you have animals that are out in the sun and they're being animals and not in a factory, I think it's a better product. And the goal is to help those producers to grow and hopefully get a number of people that are doing that sort of thing. They're raising livestock. And then at that point, we've got a market. And hopefully we send a signal to the people producing animal feed that says, hey, the market for GMO-free, organic, that's growing. So maybe we should switch some of our production this year. And, hopefully next year they switch more over and it just becomes a snowball effect to where there's a bigger market for GMO-free feed. And we can kind of at some point in the future turn that off and say, you've got 6 months and then we want everybody on GMO free because now it's available.
Right, which makes complete sense. And I think that's one of the failings of the USDA programs, that it does not really allow for the transition time for people to still be profitable. That can be a hindrance for farmers to change, because if it takes, let's say, 3 or 4 years before you can sell your product for a higher price, even so you're already paying a higher price for everything, if we want to stick with price right now, then most people can't afford to do that, right? Because from what I know, farmers are not usually the richest people in the world.
No, and I think part of that kind of feeds into the reason that things are slow to change in that whole world, because it's like any other business. You do what works, and you don't want unknowns, you don't want uncertainties and things of the sort. And that's a big unknown. If it takes you 2 or 3 years to transition over, well, I hate to say this, but on some levels, chemical fertilizers work in the sense that you get that instant boost in productivity. Of course, at the same time, you're killing off soil microbes, causing erosion and runoff and all these long-term problems, but it does work for the short term. And so what happens is there's a big fear of let's go 2 to 3 years without using the stuff that we know works and hope and pray that by year 3 we're certified and that we can raise our price point and make up for that loss. So I think that's a big problem with it. There's no transition period. There's no way to go from point A to point B without risking the whole farm.
Grace Gershuny, I interviewed on that one. She wrote a book, The Organic Revolutionary. She said that when they started out, they wanted all of that in the process, and said it got politicized and really crazy, and now it's not there. Said it's very hard for people to switch over. And it's really bad for the organic industry because the numbers are still very small, even as the demand grows. So it sounds like you guys came up with a system which might make it possible to satisfy both the consumer and the farmer as well.
Yeah, I really hope so. And that's kind of our goal, is to make it more accessible for people and to kind of get around some of the politicized problems. And just the heart and soul of USDA Organic was to make food cleaner and make it more accessible and that sort of thing. And I think it is successful on some levels, because if you look at the numbers, since the program was launched, I mean, the growth has been phenomenal. I just don't think it's what it could be if it was easier to transition.
I wanted to address something else you put on your website, and the difference between sustainability and regenerative. Do you want to explain what the difference is and why your goal is regenerative agriculture?
Yeah, regenerative ag is really a big buzzword these days. And to me, personally, the way I see it is, if you're just sustaining, you're maintaining the status quo, and you're generating systems, you're not making things work on their own and getting to that point where you're doing less work to get a higher yield. So to me, it just means setting up systems that work together naturally kind of harnessing natural ecological systems and the edge effect and that sort of thing, and some of those principles from permaculture, and making things work better so that each and every year it's not just sustained, but it gets better and better. So I guess a perfect example would be going back to the soil thing. Over time, if you build topsoil, your plants are going to be more resilient because they have access to nutrients that were locked up, they were inorganic beforehand. And when you get the biology right, you've got all these microbes that are converting stuff over. You've got beneficial fungus that's actually working with the plants in a symbiotic relationship to convert nutrient over and send stuff back and forth. So to me, that's what it means. It means getting to that point where the system's not just sustainable and you're having to work constantly to maintain what you have, but it gets better and better with less inputs over time.
Yeah, which then becomes more profitable if you want to bring it back to money too, if you don't need that much work. What is your vision for this company?
My vision for Agri True is really just to continue to grow the brand to the point we're represented at farmers markets, we're represented hopefully in all 50 states, and just get to the point where it's recognized and people look at it not necessarily on the same level as USDA Organic, but that it's recognized in the marketplace and people feel like they're purchasing a higher quality product and they can feel safe feeding it to their kids and that sort of thing. So I guess my vision over the next couple of years is to grow the brand to a point where we've got some recognition in the marketplace.
And that consumers know what it means. Because, I mean, there are a lot of labels out there which mean nothing, like natural, that means nothing, right?
I think that's a big part of it is really once we get the recognition, then comes the education of the consumer. And that's what's really going to change things around in the food industry is if people are educated about what's going into the food, how it's produced. And so to me, that's a big thing. I saw something online a few days ago kind of related to that natural thing. And I don't remember the manufacturer, but it was an ice cream manufacturer. And they're no longer able to call their product ice cream in Canada. They have to say frozen dessert because there's not enough milk and cream and sugar in there to qualify as ice cream anymore. So I thought that was interesting. And you have to wonder if it's not milk, cream, and sugar, what's in the ice cream?
Which, I mean, so many products, when you read the label, there is nothing of what the name of the product indicates. Blueberry muffins have no blueberries in them. And I think consumers are really wanting to trust a name and looking for some like that. So I really hope you guys get it out there. Now, when I say you guys, is it you, Blake, behind it? Or do you have partners bringing this forward? Or how does it work?
At the end of the day, I'm really just kind of give you some background. I've got a web development company, and we built the site and got everything online as part of a partnership with a group called PermaEthos. And PermaEthos is really a great educational resource. They do a lot of workshops and stuff online based around permaculture and regenerative ag and that sort of thing. So it was a partnership with them, and I guess the main driving force behind that has to be Jack Spirko of the Survival Podcast. He's really big into permaculture and that sort of thing. And so it was Jack's brainchild several years ago, and it's just now kind of getting to the marketplace and getting something out there that people can actually sign up for and use.
You relaunched in November then, right? November of last year.
We're brand new. We've got about a dozen farms listed right now, and we're trying to grow from there and really build up the marketing side of it, getting some material out there. So it's really a big value for people that sign up because it helps them get that promotional material, take to the farmers market, and to really educate the consumer about what's Agri True all about.
Very good. If people listen to this, what is the best way to help bringing this along? Because I think there is a huge need for being able to trust your food sources. I think there are lots and lots of people which feel very insecure often. And the more you hear about that a lot of our organic food is coming from China now, and it's not necessarily your neighborhood food. So those people who are also very concerned about lowering their carbon footprint in the world, you want to eat healthy, you want to have something which doesn't have harmful substances in it, but at the same time, you don't want it to be shipped all around the world before it hits your plate. There is also that Eat Local movement sense. So what can people do to promote this or to help this along? What would be your call for action here?
Before I get into that, you kind of gave me an idea, and I'm going to run this behind Jack and everybody else, but we probably really need to put something on the standard that says, you can't ship your product from other countries and that sort of thing. Because I think that is a big concern now. I don't know if you saw this one or not, but they showed shrimp in China that they were getting ready for market to ship over the U.S., and they were injecting it with this chemical. And it's really, I don't know if it's really a bad substance so much. It's kind of the deceptive nature. The whole purpose of it was to make the shrimp weigh a little more so they could sell it for a little more money. And if I pay for shrimp, I want to buy shrimp, not shrimp and chemicals. So
yeah, I saw it. Yeah, I think people which were filming and also which were injecting didn't even know what it is, what they're injecting. So it could be anything. But yeah, it's a good point that we don't know.
Yeah, so I'm going to look into that. I'm glad you said that. And I guess the best way to promote Agri True right now would be, if you're a farmer or a small-scale producer, go ahead and sign up on the site. Less than $1 a month is where we start out at. And if you're on the consumer side of things and you're concerned about healthy, clean food, go visit the site, go to the listings, just browse and see if there's anybody nearby you that you could do business with. And like you mentioned, keep your dollars in the local community, keep things local, reduce that transportation of food from who knows where, and reach out to people around you that are doing things the right way. And hopefully over time, when we keep dollars kind of going into that activity, there's going to be more of that activity. And over time, we'll have more regenerative farms. We'll have more Agri True certified farms. And that's kind of the best way right now you can help us promote it.
I wanted to ask you something else I forgot to ask earlier, and we touched on it, I think, a little bit when you said a product which can be made, like soaps and so forth. Now, do you have to produce all your own ingredients if you have like a value-add product? Or let's say if you wanted to do, I don't know, a certain kind of olive or something, or a pickle, could you buy those cucumbers, for example, and buy them organically or from a producer who follows the principles you want to have, and then makes that product and sell it? Or do you have to grow your own cucumbers?
No, absolutely. If you know the example of making pickles, if you know a farmer doesn't spray any chemical pesticides or they don't do any kind of chemical fertilizer, then of course you could go buy a few bushels of those, pickle them, and do that value add, take them to the farmer's market. That's totally acceptable. So it's really open not just to people that are producing like raw food resources, but also people that are adding value to a product and then taking it to market.
Okay, so you could be like a little cottage industry and participate in that. Would that be true for some like baked goods? I guess there's a whole nother cottage industry law which applies to prepared food. So maybe more like teas and stuff like that.
Not really getting into like local rules and regs as far as I'm concerned. If you have a bakery and you bake organic flour and you can certify the entire supply chain up to your point, then sure, yeah.
Would you like to add anything I didn't ask you?
No, I think we really covered everything. I did want to mention that if anybody's interested in learning more, or if you've got specific questions for me, you can just reach out to info@agritrue.com.
Do you have any social media present at this point, or it's mainly the website and you're going on podcasts and word of mouth, or where else would people find you?
Exactly. So right now we're mostly, like you said, working on the website and also Facebook. We're on there, and Twitter as well.
Okay, so let's tweet you and connect on Facebook. Sounds good. Is there anything you wanted to add about PermaEthos?
Yeah, I'm really just the humble web developer that kind of, got hooked up with Jack and PermaEthos. But, I've looked at their materials, and they're constantly putting out fresh content. And it's really some great stuff, and it's a lot of practical, how-to, hands-on type resource. So, yeah, I'd encourage everyone to go to permaethos.com and check that out also.
Yeah, so we linked to that. So I really like that there is this real cooperation going on between different entities. That's a little bit the new way of doing business too, wouldn't you think? Said we cooperate, even so we do very different things, work hand in hand like that.
So my philosophy with business is that I don't have competitors. To me, competitors don't exist because there's just so much room and so much opportunity. I don't feel like anybody should not go into business because there's opportunity out there. And you find out a lot of times that if you help somebody else out, they're willing to help you, whether that's either just a referral or, hey, I know somebody that you might want to talk to, you might be able to do business with them. And if you reciprocate and you help other people along their journey, things always come back to you. So that's my philosophy on business in a nutshell, is that, the more you work and collaborate with others, the more successful you'll be over time.
I love that. That's so nice and so refreshing because competition just doesn't seem to work that well. I think if we work together, we can create great things. I so agree with you. Thank you so much, Blake. I really, really appreciate that you came on and we talked. Thank you.
Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
I hope you will give Agri True a try and support your local farmer. That's always a good idea. So even if nobody in your area is yet on the Agri True website, go to the farmer's market and see what people are up to. You can always talk to them. I often buy from farmers which are not necessarily certified organic, but we had conversations and I trust what they're telling me, that they're not spraying any chemicals I don't want to have in my body, and will choose accordingly. On another note, it's almost Easter, and if you celebrate Easter, we wish you a happy Easter. And I found on Instagram, and one of my friends or followers, or I don't know how you call it necessarily, but Hilary Moore had what I thought was an excellent idea, and I wanted to share it with you. So she said to use t-shirts or old fabric you have and sew an Easter egg. So you can use a hand needle and thread, or your sewing machine. Cut out a needle, cut out an egg shape and sew it. Leave a little opening. Turn it around and then stuff it for older children with money, for example. They will really love you forever. But anyways, this is a great alternative to using those plastic eggs which end up in the landfill and are quite ugly. I wanted to give Hilary Moore a shout out. And if you are on Instagram, you can follow her under the Sustainable Steward _Hilary. And of course, follow us, Sustainable Living Podcast, on Instagram. Thank you so much for listening. We really, really love that you take the time to listen to our podcast. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Bye for now.